Hello everyone, welcome to English with Shalini, and in this video we are going to discuss chapter 3 Deep Water. So first of all we will read about the author, then we will go to the explanation of the chapter. So this Deep Water has been written by William Douglas. And who was William Douglas? William Douglas was born in Mime, Minnesota, USA, and after graduating with a Bachelor's of Art in English and Economics, he spent 2 years teaching high school in Yakima. So, however, he got tired of this and decided to pursue a legal career. So he met Franklin D. Roosevelt at Yale, and they became an advisor and friend to the president. So he was such a important person that he was a friend to president, and Douglas was a leading advocate of individual rights. He retired in 1975 after a term lasting 36 years and remains the longest serving justice in the history of the court. So the following excerpt, that is the following portion, is taken from Of Men and Mountains by William O. Douglas. So he has written a book in which he has written about his adventures. So that is a autobiographical kind of book. So the name is Of Men and Mountains, and this Deep Water is an excerpt from that book. So it reveals how, as a young boy, William Douglas nearly drowned in the swimming pool. And in this essay, he talks about his fear of water and thereafter what happens. So, however, he finally overcomes it. He overcomes the fear of water. And so, notice how the autobiographical part of the selection is used to support this discussion of the fear. So, now we will read the chapter. So now Douglas is writing, it had happened when I was 10 or 11-year old. I had decided to learn to swim. So he's telling about the story how he was a 10-year boy, and there was a pool at YMCA in Yakima. So that offered exactly the opportunity. So he wanted to learn swimming, and the Yakima River was treacherous. So there was in a Yakima state there was a river also, Yakima River, which was very dangerous and treacherous. And mother continually warned against it and kept fresh in my mind the details of each drowning in the river. So that river, Yakima River, was dangerous. So his mother always warned him that you must not go to that river because people used to drown there. But the YMCA pool was safe. So he had a swimming pool around his house that was a YMCA pool. So author wanted to learn swimming there. So it was only 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end, and while it was 9 feet deep at the other end. So the drop was gradual. So this is the structure of the swimming pool, where there is a shallow end also and there is a deep end also, but that deepness increases slowly. So I got a pair of water wings. You can see this is water wings this boy is wearing. So I got a pair of water wings and went to the pool. I hated to walk naked into it and show my skinny legs. He was very thin, so he didn't want to go with that skinny legs. But I subdued my pride and did it. So anyhow, he started swimming. From the beginning, however, I had an aversion to water. I had a um, deep fear for water, and when I was in it, this started when I was 3 or 4 years old. Father took me to the beach in California. Now the writer is telling about the childhood experience, how he was 3 or 4 year old and how his father was taking him to the beach of California. And he means his father and I stood together in the surf, in the that surf area, and I hung on to it. I hung on to him, yet The waves knocked me down and swept over me. I was buried in water. So it was a kind of a misadventure. So my breath was gone. I was frightened. Father laughed. But there was terror in my heart at the overpowering force of the waves. So the author was very fearful because waves were overpowering him. And my introduction to the YMCA swimming pool revived unpleasant memories and stirred childish fears. So, when he entered to the YMCA swimming pool, that memory of childhood days came upon him. But in a little while, I gathered confidence. So I paddled with my new water wings. So he started swimming with his water wings, watching the other boys and trying to learn by aping them. He was trying to imitate them. I did this 2 or 3 times on different days and was just beginning to feel at ease in the water when the misadventure happened. So this author practiced this swimming practices for 2 or 3 days. Then something happened to him. I went to the pool when no one else was there. So one day he went to the pool where there was no one. This is the scene of the swimming pool. So the place was very quiet. The water was still, and the tiled bottom was as white and clean as bathtub. So it was a very clean water, and I was timid about going in the alone. So the writer didn't want to go in swimming pool alone. So I sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. I had not been there long ago when in came a big bruiser a boy. So there came a bruiser a boy means there came a bully, probably 18 years old. So there came a bully kind of a boy, and who was probably 18 years old. He was a muscular. So he had thick hair on his chest. He was a beautiful physical specimen with his legs and arms that showed where is I? So where I was. So a specimen with legs and arms that showed rippling muscles. He yelled, "Hi, skinny! How do you like to be dogged?" So that boy screamed upon him and said that high skinny means that Douglas was very skinny and very thin. So he made fun of him that do you want to be thrown into that pool? With that he picked me up and tossed me into the deep end. So I landed in a sitting position. That writer was sitting there, so he landed on the pool in the sitting position only, and he swallowed water, lot of water, and went at the once at the bottom. So as soon as that bully threw author into the swimming pool, he swallowed lot of water and he went to the bottom of the swimming pool. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. I had little sense and I was thinking about a plan. So on the way down, I planned. When my feet hit the bottom, I would make a big jump, come to the surface, lie flat on it, and paddle to the edge of the pool. So it seemed a long way down. So writer was although he was frightened, but he had planned that he can come to the surface of the water anyhow because he had done some practice for 2 or 3 days. So those 9 feet were more like a 90, and before I touched bottom, my lungs were ready to burst. So I was very fearful and my lungs were very means it was full of water. But when my feet hit bottom, I summoned all my strength. I collected all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upward. So I wanted to come out of the water as a spring, as a spring comes out. I imagined I would bob to the surface like a cork. As the cork come out of the bottle, I would come out of the water like that. So instead I came up slowly, but things were not going on as he planned. He was coming to the water very slowly. I opened my eyes and saw nothing but water. There was water all around. Water, water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. So earlier, that writer has seen that a swimming pool is so clean and the water is so clean and everything is very clean. But now his experiences that he is surrounded by the dirty water, because he's when he is seeing in the water, he is able to see only the that pale water, that yellow tinge water. So I grew panicky. I was so fearful. I raised up as if to grab a rope, and my hands clutched only at water. So I was not able to grab any rope or anything. I was just holding waters because there was water and water all around. I was suffocating. I was running out of my breath. I tried to yell, but no sound came out, because in water, from water you can't have the sounds. So then my eyes and nose came out of the water, but not my mouth. So anyhow, he was struggling for survival. He was struggling to come out of water, and failed I flayed at the surface of the water. So now he is saying that he flayed at the surface of the water, and swallowed and choked. So so he swallowed a lot of water, and he was feeling as if he was choked. I tried to bring my legs up, but they hung as dead weight. So his legs were becoming very heavy and paralyzed and rigid. So out of fear, he was feeling as if he was paralyzed. His legs are paralyzed, and that is stiff and rigid. A great force was pulling me under, and a gravitational force was pulling him under. He was pulling by the water force. I screamed, but only the water heard me. So his scream was heard by water only. I had started on long journey back to the bottom of the pool. So again he was drowning in the pool, bottom in the bottom of the pool. So I struck at a water as I went down, expending my strength as one in nightmare fights an irresistible force. So now writer is telling that he was struck in water and he was going down, and he was trying to gather his strength. He wanted to come out of his that water, but he was not able to do, and he was feeling as if he was watching some nightmare, and some irresistible force is pulling him down. Now I had lost all my breath. I was out of my breath. I was exhausted. My lungs ached because of lot of that continuous efforts. My lungs were panicked. My lungs were that exhausted, and my head troubled. There was a my trouble in my head. My head throbbed. I was getting dizzy, but I remembered the strategy. Still I had a plan. I would spring from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface. Again he had a plan that I will come like a cork. I would lie flat on the water, then I will lie flat on the water, strike out with my arms, and thrash with my legs. So for 3 days he has learned swimming. So he because of that swimming practice, he could survive for that much time. Otherwise, if he would have not done so much practice, he would have drowned up to this level. So he thought that when I will come to the surface of water, I will throw my legs and arms and I will try to swim and I will be saved. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. I went down endlessly, but this was only thinking. He was going down and down endlessly. There was no end to it. So I opened my eyes. Nothing but water with a yellow glow, dark water that one could not see through. So he was not able to see anything. Only thing he was able to see was a water and nothing else. And water was now looking like a dark water. It was all dark, and he was not able to see through it that. And then sheer stark terrorism is very great. Terror seized me. I was very much terrified. Terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control. So he was surrounded by uncontrolled terror, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. Only a person who has experienced it can understand it. Otherwise nobody can understand my situation. I was shrieking, I was under the water, I was screaming, I was yelling. I was paralyzed under water, stiff rigid with fear. I was very fearful, and my body was stiff rigid. I was paralyzed with fear. Even the screams in my throat were frozen. So I was trying to yell, but I felt that my scream is also frozen. It's not coming out of my throat. Only my heart and the pounding in my head said that I was still alive. So the writer was feeling as if he is dead. Only he was experiencing some pounding, some hitting in his head, and he was experiencing some pounding in his heart. That was the only signal that he was being alive. Otherwise, he was feeling as if he is dead. And I then in the midst of the terror came a touch of reason. So again, a reason came to him. He wanted to use his intelligence to come out of the water. I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. So again, he is thinking that as if as soon as my leg will hit the bottom of the tile of the swimming pool, I will jump again and come to surface. At last, I felt the tiles under me. So at last he was able to feel that tiles. My toes reached out as if to grab them. He wanted to grab the tiles, and I jumped with everything I had. So with the utmost force he could apply, he tried to push the tiles and come out of the water. But the jump made no difference. But this was also not of no avail, and the water was still around me. He was still surrounded by water. I looked for ropes, ladder, water wings. So he was now struggling. He was thinking that anything he will grab upon, and he will come out of that with that help. Ladder, maybe water, wings, maybe ropes. But he was not getting anything. Nothing but water. But he was, whatever he was catching was just water. A mass of yellow water held me. He was surrounded by yellow water, dirty water now. Stark terror took an even deeper hold on me. So now, as the time passed, the fear of stark fear was surrounding him. He was becoming more and more fearful with the passage of time, because he was exhausting also, and like a great charge of electricity. So as if he has been given a shock. So that shock of electricity was given to his body. He was feeling like that. So I shook and trembled with fright. He was trembling with fright and fear. My arms couldn't move. He was not able to move his arms. My legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, to call for mother. He wanted to call for his mother, that mother come and save me, but he was not able to do anything. Nothing happened. He was not able to get any help because he was inside the pool. And then, strangely, there was a light. So he saw some light. I was coming out of the awful yellow water. So somehow he experienced that he was coming out of that yellow dirty water. At last, at least my eyes were. So his eyes were coming out, means he was just coming to the surface, only his eyes came out of that water. My nose was almost out too. Then I started down a third time. Then he again started sinking to the bottom. So he was struggling, coming out of water and going to the bottom. There was continuous to and fro movement. I sucked for a air and got water. So he wanted to take breath, he wanted to have air, but only thing he was getting was water. The yellowish light was going out. Then all efforts ceased. So earlier he was making efforts, he wanted to come out of water, but with the passage of time he was being exhausted, and he was thinking that now light is going out of his life and his efforts was being ceased. I relaxed, even my legs felt limp, and he was so tired that his legs were limp. As if it was paralyzed, and a blackness swept over my brain. So there was a blackout around my brain. I was not able to think, I was not able to make any plan. It wiped out fear. So at that time I felt that I was out of fear, I was not experiencing fear at that time. It wiped out fear, and there was no more panic. So I was not panicky at all. I was quiet and peaceful. That situation was very quiet and very peaceful situation, nothing to be afraid of. And I felt that I had nothing to be afraid of. And this is nice, this is to be drowsy. He was feeling drowsy, he was drowsy, numbness was taking over his body. So to go to the sleep, no need to jump. So now he thought that he is going, he is sleeping forever, he is dying. So he was too tired to jump. His body felt that now I can't make any more efforts. So he was retiring to his situation that, "Oh, okay, I am dying, let me die." So it's nice to be carried gently. So that water is itself carrying him gently to float along in the space. He was feeling as if he is dying, as if he is floating in the space. Tender arms around me, there is tender arms around me, which is surrounding me. Tender arms like my mother, and that tender arms are like his mother's arms. So now I must go to sleep. Now I will must go to sleep, and that sleep is sleep of death. I crossed to oblivion. I forget everything, and the curtain of life fell. So I felt as if curtain of my life has fell forever, and everything has finished in my life. I'm dying. I know I have no need to make any effort. The next I remember, I was lying on my stomach beside the pool, so vomiting. So now for a moment I don't remember anything. Only thing I remember is that I was lying on the that beside the pool, and I was vomiting a lot. The chap, that bully person, that bully boy chap that threw me in the was saying, but I was only fooling, I was just kidding. Like someone said, the kid nearly died, be all right now. So that man told that bully boy that how, what did you do to him? He was almost dying, and then he told me that be all right now. Let's carry him to the locker room. So they were carrying me to the locker room. Several hours later, I walked home. So I rested there for several hours. Then I walked to home. I was weak and trembling. I shook and cried when I lay on my bed. So he was so terrified that he was crying. He was when he was lying in his bed in his home. I couldn't eat that night. For days, a haunting fear was in my heart. I was haunted by that fear of deep water, that drowning incident. The slightest exertion upset me, and whenever I had to do some work I was exhausted, and that Fear took over my body and my mind, making me wobbly in knees. And I felt wobbly in my knees. My knees were shaking and sick to my stomach. I was sick up to my stomach. I never went back to the pool. Then I never went to that dangerous pool of YMCA. I feared water. Now I was I was having some hydrophobia. I was being hydrophobic. I was having fear of water. I was not going around the pool. I avoided it whatever I could. So whenever I could avoid that water, I avoided it. A few years later, when I came to know the waters of the cascades. So now he was going to some cascade means jharna. So that spring. So I wanted to get into them. And whether I was wading that titan or bumping river or bathing in warm lake of the goat rocks, the terror that had seized me in the pool would come back. So now he is telling about the other places where he was going. So he was going around the that spring. He was going around some river. So whenever he was going around these water sites, that fear seized him, and he was not able to put his feet in that water, and it would take possession of me completely. He was totally overpowered by that fear. He was not able to do anything. He was feeling as if his life is ruined. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart, and he was very horrified. This handicap stayed with me as the years rolled by. So now that author was growing with this fear of water in canoes. Canoes means a small boat on Miami lake, fishing for landlocked salmon, bass fishing in the New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Desch shores, and the Metollis in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia at Bumping Lake in Cascade. Whenever I went, so now he was going to some places where there was a fishing was going on, or he wanted to do some fishing. So whenever he was going there, I went. The haunting fear of the water followed me. So wherever he was going, he was followed by that haunting fear, that dangerous fear of water, and it ruined my fishing trips, deprived me of the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. So, writer is adventurous. He want to swim. He wanted to do boating. He wanted to do canoeing. Canoeing means that a small river trip. So, he wanted to swim anyhow, but he was not able to overpower his fear. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but he wanted to get off that fear, and he is using his willpower to get off that fear, but he was not able to do so. But it held me firmly in its grip. But the grip of the fear was so intense that he was not able to come out of that grip. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. Then finally, he decided that डर के आगे जीत है, and he decided to get out of his fear, and he hired some swimming instructor which can teach him swimming. So I went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week. So now writer is telling that he went to some another pool and he practiced for a week, an hour each day, and he was practicing 5 days a week, and he was practicing for an hour each day. The swimming instructor, put a belt around me, and a rope attached to the belt went through a pulley that ran on a overhead cable. So now since he was very fearful. So now when he was learning swimming, that one rope was attached to his waist, and that he was attached to his instructor with the cable, so that whenever there is some misadventure, or whenever there is something happened to him, that instructor will be able to save him anyhow. So he held on the end of the rope, and we went back and forth across the pool, and hours after hours, day after day, week after week. So this practice was going every week, every day, almost every day. And so there was a continuous practice by instructor and that Douglas, William Douglas. So on each trip across the pool, a bit of the panic seized me, but in each pool, in the each that pool, swimming pool trip, he was not able to come out of his fear. He was experiencing that little amount of fear which he had earlier in large amount. So each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and I went under, some of the old terror returned and my legs froze. So whenever he went to the water, the old fear of that drowning in the water returned again, and he felt as if his legs were frozen. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack. Now, slack means lessen. So, when he started swimming, and 3 month has passed, now some tension was decreasing, some tension of that drowning experiences was decreasing day by day. Then I taught me to put my face under water and exhale. So that instructor taught him how to exhale, how to inhale underwater, and to raise my nose and inhale. So he taught him that whenever you come out of that water, you must inhale, and you must raise your nose and inhale. So I repeated the exercise 100 of times. Now he was practicing it many times. Bit by bit, slowly, I shed part of the panic that seized me when my head went underwater. So I was slowly coming out of my fear. I was seizing my fear. I was coming out of the fear of that drowning experiences, but slowly. That was not one day. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. So now he's anyhow, that instructor is trying to build his confidence. And next thing he taught him was he brought him near the side of the pool, and then he told him that kick with legs. So for weeks I did just that. So again, writer practiced this thing. At first my legs refused to work. Earlier he was not able to perform this, but they gradually relaxed. So gradually relaxation was coming, and finally I could command them. So finally he was able to have command over his legs and command over the swimming practice. Thus, pieces by pieces, little by little, he built a swimmer. So, little by little, he made me a swimmer, a very good swimmer. And when I had perfected each piece, he put them together into an integrated whole. So my instructor was very good. He didn't taught me everything at once. He taught me in the pieces, little by little. Then he overall put them together, and he told me that you have learned now. So in April he said, now you can swim. So he started swimming. He started learning swimming in the October, but now April has come, and now my instructor told me that now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl stroke. So this is a crawl stroke is the technique of the swimming, and the instructor instructed him that make a hole, that round of that pool and come to this beginning point, and I did. So writer was able to do that. The instructor was finished. Now the work of instructor was done. He taught him everything he could teach him, but I was not finished. But the writer is telling that the instructor has done his work, but I thought that I am not able to swim, because technique was just not enough. I was surrounded by the fear. I still wondered if I would be terror stricken. terror stricken when I was alone in the pool. So now writer is thinking that okay, I am feeling good when instructor is around me, but what will happen when my instructor will go and I will be alone? When my instructor will be no more there, then again that fear of drowning will come over me, and I will not able to swim. I tried it. I tried it anyhow. I swam the length up and down. Tiny vestiges of the old terror could return. But whenever I tried to swim, that tiny vestiges means little fear of that old memories came upon me, and I was again very much terrified. But now I could frown and say to that terror, but now I could be angry and tell to that fear, trying to scare me. Ha! Well, here is to you. Look, and off I go for another length of the pool. So now he was talking to his fear that, do you want to make me fearful? I am not fearful of you. You go away. I can swim with full confidence. And is in this way, I started swimming to the whole length of the pool. This went on until July. So he kept practicing until July, but I was still not satisfied. So there was something in it. He was having some lack of satisfaction. I was not sure that all the terror had left. So he felt that at some point of time he was fearing, and so I went to the Lake Wentworth in the New Hampshire, dived off a dock, a strange island, and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. So now he has gone to some island, and he that island had two that island, and that island had two point, and he made swimming between that island. So I swam the crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke. So now this is the techniques of swimming which he is telling that I did all this swimming techniques, breaststroke, side stroke, backstroke, everything. Only once did the terror return. Then again I became fearful. When I was in middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. Then again when I saw to the water, I was not able to see anything, but there was just bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature. Again I was fearful. Although I was very little fearful, that was miniature fear. I laughed and said, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" It fled and swam on. So again he was talking to that fear that that, oh Mr. Terror, you can't make me fearful, you can't do anything to me, I am still very confident I can do everything. So it fled and swam. So that fear fled out of his body, yet and mind. Yet I had residual doubts, but he was doubtful. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up the Titan to Conrad Meadow, up the Conrad Creek Trail to Meadow Glacier, and the camped in the high meadow by side of the warm lake. So now he is telling about the places where he these are the water places where he went. He went to the Meadow Glacier and the Conrad Meadow and all these places and warm lakes, and where he swam. Next morning, I striped. I striped my clothes and dived into the lake and swam across the other shore and back, just as dog Cotton used to do. So dog Cotton Corpon was a name of a great swimmer. So now writer is telling that I used to swim like that dog Corpon, and I swam across the shores of that lake, and I shouted with joy. I was very joyful, and I was shouting with my joy. And Gilbert Peak returned the echo. And when I was shouting, that Gilbert Peak, that Gilbert Mountain was echoing my sound of joy. I had conquered my fear of water. The experience had a deep meaning for me. This was a great experience for me. This was a great achievement for me. as only those, it was life changing experience for him, and he was very joyful. And so is only those who has known the stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. So now writer is telling that my situation was such that only those person can understand my situation and my fear who have gone through such kind of experience. In death there is peace. Terror is terror. There is terror only in the fear of death, as Roosevelt knew. So now he is telling that there is some kind of peace in death. That writer has experienced some near kind of death situation. He was almost dying. So now he experienced that there was a peace in death. And he is telling, then there is terror only in the fear of death. So when we are fearful of death, we are terrified. We think that we will die, and we are terrified. And as Roosevelt knew, Roosevelt was his friend and former president of USA, and he's telling that as Roosevelt knew when he said, "All we have to fear is fear itself." So Roosevelt has said that whatever we have to fear is that fear itself. All we have to fear is the fear itself. So because I had experienced both the sensations of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, so will to live somehow grew in intensity. So now writer is telling that I have experienced the sensation of dying and fear of that fear. So now I am experienced person, and I can tell anything. And I know that how to live life with gusto and just, and I wanted to live life with full energy. So at last I felt released, and at last I felt that I have come through my fear and free to walk the trails and the climb the peaks and the brush aside fear. So at last he is feeling that he can brush aside his fear completely, and he can climb the peak, and he can walk to the trails, everything, and he can swim very well. So that was the chapter. So it has a message that we must overcome our fear, and so this was the message. Thank you so much for listening.